Le Chateau was more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of luxury, an exclusive haven where America's wealthiest dined in ultimate sophistication. Nestled in the heart of New York City, this five-star establishment was renowned for its impeccable service and world-class cuisine. Business moguls, A-list celebrities, and influential politicians gathered around pristine, white tablecloth settings, sipping aged wine and indulging in meticulously crafted dishes prepared by one of the most celebrated chefs in the industry. Conversations drifted through the air: stocks, real estate investments, private jets, and summer retreats in the Hamptons or York. Meanwhile, an invisible army of workers moved silently in the background: servers, dishwashers, cooks, and janitors, ensuring every detail remained flawless. Keanu Reeves stepped into this world not as a Hollywood star, but as an unnoticed janitor. Dressed in a faded uniform, his name tag was simple, his posture slightly hunched, blending into the background. No one acknowledged him. No one cared. To the elite, people like him were practically invisible. But Keanu wasn't there to clean floors. He was there to watch, to learn. From the outside, everything at Le Chateau appeared perfect. Crystal glasses gleaming under golden chandeliers, entrees plated with the precision of fine art. But within days, Keanu began to see cracks in the illusion. Forced smiles, nervous glances exchanged between staff, an unsettling silence whenever the manager passed by. The air in the kitchen was thick with tension, not just the aroma of gourmet cuisine. Something was off, something so deliberately hidden beneath the glamour, and Keanu was determined to uncover it. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The kitchen at Le Chateau was a well-oiled machine moving with clockwork precision. Every dish was plated with artistic perfection, every wine bottle poured with an elegant tilt to the wrist. The staff, from the executive chef down to the dishwashers, operated in seamless synchrony. It was a place that prided itself on an impeccable reputation. A restaurant where a single mistake could mean the difference between a flawless dining experience and a bad review in a prestigious food magazine. But Keanu had spent a lifetime studying people, learning to read their faces, their body language, their hidden fears. And there was something wrong here. It wasn't just the intensity of the work. In any high-end kitchen, stress was expected. The heat, the pressure, the unrelenting demand for perfection. It was part of the job. But at Le Chateau, it was different. Keanu noticed it in the way the younger cooks flinched when the head chef, Marco Soleri, walked by. Marco wasn't the type to shout, but his presence alone carried a quiet, suffocating dominance. A single glance from him was enough to send an inexperienced line cook into a panic. He ruled the kitchen like a king. His word was final, his temper unpredictable. But even Marco wasn't the most powerful figure in the restaurant. That title belonged to James Calloway. The general manager of Le Chateau was a man who never raised his voice, but somehow managed to inspire more fear than the head chef. He didn't need to shout to get his way. He simply spoke in a low, controlled tone that made it clear there was no room for negotiation. His power was subtle, like the steady tightening of a noose. People obeyed him, not because they respected him, but because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. And that fear was what tipped Keanu off. One night, a server returned to the kitchen with a problem. A guest had ordered the most expensive item on the menu, a $450 Wagyu steak, seared to perfection and served with imported truffle butter. But the steak had been undercooked. The guest, expecting nothing less than perfection, had sent it back. Keanu, who was mopping the floor nearby, paused to watch. Marco cursed under his breath. Replacing a steak that expensive was a costly mistake. But instead of preparing a new one, Marco did something that made Keanu's stomach tighten. He took the same steak, threw it back on the grill for exactly 30 more seconds, then transferred it onto a fresh plate with the new garnish. The server hesitated. "Shouldn't we?" Marco's eyes turned cold. "Take the plate," he said. Without another word, the server swallowed hard, picked up the dish, and carried it back to the dining room. Keanu stood frozen, gripping the mop handle. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't an oversight. That was deception. A deliberate act to cut costs at the expense of the customer. But as he would soon find out, it was just the beginning. Over the next several days, Keanu started paying closer attention. The more he observed, the more unsettling details he uncovered. 1. Expired ingredients and food reuse. Keanu saw firsthand how Le Chateau cut corners when it came to ingredients. Meat that was a day or two past its expiration date was still being served, repackaged to look fresh. Bread that had gone stale was reheated and passed off as freshly baked. Leftover seafood from the previous night's service, shrimp, scallops, even expensive Alaskan king crab, was repurposed into the next day's specials. Even the restaurant's famous $250 caviar appetizer was suspect. One night, Keanu overheard 2 line cooks whispering. They had been instructed to combine remnants from used caviar tins and reseal them in fresh packaging. "It's fine," one of them muttered. "It's not like they can tell the difference." Keanu knew better. A place like Le Chateau prided itself on exclusivity. Guests believed they were paying for the best ingredients money could buy. In reality, they were being served food that, in any honest establishment, would have been thrown away. 2. Cheap wine passed off as premium. One of the biggest scams happened at the bar. Le Chateau boasted an extensive wine list featuring rare vintages that could cost anywhere from $500 to $5,000 per bottle. Guests paid top dollar for a bottle of 1,945 Chateau Mouton Rothschild or a 1,982 Screaming Eagle Cabernet, expecting the finest. What they didn't know was that many of these bottles had never been opened. Instead, bartenders were ordered to refill empty high-end bottles with mid-range wines that retailed for a fraction of the price. The markup was astronomical. A $40 bottle of California Cabernet was being served as a $1,200 vintage from Bordeaux. Keanu watched as unsuspecting guests swirled their glasses, inhaled the aroma, and sipped their wine with satisfaction, completely unaware that they were being swindled. 3. Fear and silence. The most disturbing part, everyone in the kitchen knew. The sous chefs, the line cooks, the dishwashers. They all saw what was happening, but no one spoke up. Keanu quickly realized why. One night he was cleaning the back storage area when he overheard a conversation between James Calloway and Marco Solari. Their voices were low but sharp. "We can't keep cutting corners like this," Marco muttered. "If someone finds out..." "No one is going to find out," James interrupted, his tone smooth, controlled, "because no one is stupid enough to talk. You understand?" Silence. Then, finally, Marco exhaled. I understand." Keanu clenched his jaw. This wasn't about saving money. This was a system, a carefully orchestrated scheme designed to deceive customers while keeping employees terrified of speaking up. Anyone who asked too many questions wouldn't just get fired, they would be blacklisted, ensuring they would never work in fine dining again. Keanu could have walked away that night. He could have finished his experiment, gone home, and left someone else to deal with it. But he had spent his entire career playing men who stood up to corruption. Now it was time to become one. That night, after his shift, Keanu sat alone in the janitor's closet staring at his phone. He had recorded everything, the conversations, the deceit, the fear in the eyes of the staff. He had enough evidence to destroy James Calloway's empire. But he had to be smart. If he made a mistake, they wouldn't just fire him. They'd bury him. Taking a deep breath, Keanu pulled up a contact on his phone. Someone who could help, someone who knew how to make sure this story wouldn't be silenced. His finger hovered over the call button. Then, without hesitation, he pressed it. The confrontation with the system. Keanu Reeves had seen enough. For a week, he had worked undercover as a janitor at Le Chateau, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. He had witnessed $450 Wagyu steaks being deceptively reheated, expired seafood repackaged, and cheap wine served as premium bottles worth thousands. But more than that, he had seen the fear. Employees too terrified to speak up, knowing that one wrong move could cost them everything. One night, Keanu overheard a conversation that confirmed his suspicions. "We can't keep cutting corners like this," head chef Marco Solari muttered. "No one is going to find out," General Manager James Calloway interrupted coldly, "because no one is stupid enough to talk." Keanu clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about food fraud. It was a system of deception, protected by fear. That night, he sat alone in the janitor's closet staring at his phone. He had recordings, receipts, and testimony. The question wasn't whether he could expose them, it was how much danger he would be in once he did the showdown. The next morning, Le Chateau felt different. Staff were whispering, eyes darting nervously. Lisa, a hostess, approached Keanu. "You really did it, didn't you?" she asked. Keanu nodded. Someone had to. Before they could say more, Marco appeared. "Reed, come with me." Keanu followed him into a back hallway where Marco turned, his face tense. "You have no idea what you're messing with," Marco hissed. "I know exactly what I'm messing with," Keanu shot back. "You're running a scam, cutting corners, and serving garbage to people who trust this place." Marco sighed. "You'd think I have a choice. People like James don't just fire you, they bury you." Before Keanu could respond, the kitchen door swung open. James Calloway strode in, his movements precise, his expression unreadable. "You don't belong here," he said smoothly. Keanu didn't flinch. "No, I don't, because I actually care about the people eating here." James's lips curled into a sinister smirk. "Careful, you're making enemies you don't want." Keanu met his gaze. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing." The tension was suffocating. James turned to Marco. "You know what to do?" Marco hesitated, then looked back at Keanu. His voice was low. "You need to leave. Now." Keanu held his ground. "Or what?" Marco's voice dropped even lower. "You won't get a second warning. The first strike." That night, Keanu sat at his laptop. He had everything. Recordings, receipts, proof of fraud. A single email sat open. Subject: undeniable evidence. The truth about Le Chateau. He clicked send. By morning, the world knew. Le Chateau was shut down. Investigators swarmed the restaurant. James vanished. His powerful connections cut taut. Keanu had won the first battle, but he knew James was right about one thing. People like him don't just disappear. And now they were coming for Keanu. The morning after Keanu sent the email, Le Chateau was in chaos. Health inspectors arrived before the first lunch reservation, uncovering expired ingredients, mislabeled wines, and unsanitary storage conditions. Within hours, the restaurant was shut down. A closed health code violations under investigation notice plastered on the front doors. Staff whispered in panic, uncertain of their futures. For the first time, Le Chateau wasn't ruled by fear, but by the realization that it was over. The fallout. Keanu stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold. Lisa approached, arms crossed. "You did it," she murmured. "No, we did," Keanu corrected. She sighed. "James is finished. But Marco, he disappeared the second the inspectors walked in." Keanu expected that. Marco had always been torn between doing what was right and saving himself. He chose to run. James, however, did not. The warning. That evening, as Keanu stepped outside into the crisp New York air, a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up beside him. The tinted window lowered, revealing James Calloway's cold, calculating eyes. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts," James said smoothly. "You think you've won, but people like me don't just disappear." His gaze flicked to Lisa. "And neither do problems." Keanu took a slow step forward, placing himself between Lisa and the car. His voice was calm, steady. "You were never the problem, James. You were just the guy who got caught." James smirked. "The restaurant's gone, but the people who backed it, they're still out there, and they don't like being exposed." Keanu tilted his head. Maybe. Or maybe the world is changing, and people are done being stepped on." For the first time, doubt flickered in James's eyes. Without another word, he rolled the window up. The Escalade idled for a few moments before speeding into the night. Lisa let out a shaky breath. Okay, that was terrifying. Keanu kept his eyes on the road. That wasn't power, that was desperation. A bigger game. They stood in silence until Lisa finally asked, "So, are you really Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smirked. "If I say yes, are you going to ask for an autograph?" Lisa chuckled. "Nah, I think I like Kevin Reed better. He actually did something." Before Keanu could respond, His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Nice work. We should talk. Call me when you're ready." No name, no details, just a cryptic message from someone who had been watching everything unfold. Keanu exhaled, pocketing the phone. "I have a feeling this isn't over," he muttered. Elisa sighed. "Guess I should get used to looking over my shoulder." Keanu chuckled. If James was really that powerful, he wouldn't have shown up himself. But still, stay sharp. As they walked down the street, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into something far bigger than Le Chateau. And whoever had sent that message, they were waiting for his next move. Keanu thought Le Chateau's downfall would be the end of it. He was wrong. The restaurant's closure made headlines, but something was off. Articles exposing Le Chateau's fraudulent practices started disappearing. Whistleblowers retracted their statements. Health inspectors who had shut down the restaurant suddenly changed their reports. Someone was cleaning up the mess. James Calloway had powerful connections, and they were working to bury the truth before it could spread. Le Chateau wasn't just a corrupt restaurant. It was a front for something bigger. Keanu's gut told him to stay on high alert. That night, as he walked home through the dimly lit streets of Manhattan, a black SUV idled across from his apartment. It had been there that morning, and now it was still there. He adjusted his jacket, crossing the street. The second he stepped onto the sidewalk, the SUV's engine roared to life. The tinted passenger window rolled down, revealing a man in a dark suit. His voice was calm, controlled. "You've been busy, Mr. Reeves." Keanu didn't react, keeping his stance relaxed, but inside, every instinct screamed danger. "You can make this easy," the man continued. "Forget everything. Move on." Keanu tilted his head. "And if I don't?" The man chuckled. "Then you'll learn how people like us handle problems." With that, the SUV sped off into the night. Keanu exhaled slowly. That wasn't a threat. That was a declaration of war. The uncovering. The next morning, Keanu met Lisa at a diner just outside the city. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her fingers nervously tapping her coffee cup. "I did some digging," she said, sliding a manila folder across the table. Keanu flipped through the documents, bank statements, wire transfers, shell companies. Lisa leaned in. James wasn't just running a dirty restaurant, he was laundering money, a lot of it. Keanu's eyes narrowed. The names on the accounts weren't just random investors. They were CEOs, politicians, people who couldn't afford to be exposed. "That's why the media isn't covering this," Lisa continued. "Why witnesses are suddenly changing their stories. They're making sure James disappears before he can talk." Keanu's mind worked fast. "They tried to scare me off last night." Lisa's eyes widened. "What?" Keanu nodded. "Followed me. Made it clear I was in over my head." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "They want this to go away." Lisa studied him for a long moment. Then, she reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. "And they're too late." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" Lisa smirked. "The truth. Every shady transaction, every dirty deal, every piece of evidence that connects James to the people pulling the strings." She slid the USB across the table. "We leak this, and they don't just lose a restaurant, they lose everything." Keanu picked up the drive, turning it between his fingers. He knew what this meant. The moment this information went public, there would be no turning back. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Lisa met his gaze. "Are you?" Keanu thought about the black SUV, the voice in the night, the feeling in his gut that walking away was never an option. He smiled. "Let's burn it all down." That night, Keanu sat at his laptop, the USB drive plugged in, the files loaded, bank statements, shell company records, recorded conversations, hidden transactions. Everything was there, exposing Le Chateau not just as a fraudulent restaurant, but as a front for money laundering, political bribes, and high-level corruption. A single email sat open, addressed to major journalists, watchdog organizations, and federal investigators. Subject: undeniable evidence. The truth about Le Chateau. Keanu took a deep breath and clicked send. By morning, the world knew. Of fallout, the news exploded. Within hours, major outlets picked up the story. Elite NYC restaurant exposed for fraud, ties to corrupt officials, headlines screamed. Television anchors discussed the shocking evidence showing wire transfers linking Le Chateau to powerful investors, politicians, and criminal enterprises. Social media erupted in outrage. Customers who had once bragged about dining at Le Chateau now deleted posts, embarrassed to be associated with a scandal of this magnitude. But the real chaos began when the arrests started. The collapse of an empire. By midday, health inspectors officially revoked Le Chateau's license. Federal agents raided the restaurant, seizing financial records, computer drives, and security footage. James Calloway was nowhere to be found. His bank accounts were frozen, his business assets seized, his so-called powerful connections had abandoned him. Marco Saleri, the head chef, turned himself in, hoping to cooperate in exchange for leniency. He confirmed everything: expired ingredients, fraudulent practices, and the fear-based system James had built. But the real bombshell? James wasn't just running a restaurant scam, he had been moving millions through fake supplier contracts, offshore accounts, and political donations. The government launched a full-scale investigation into high-profile names who had protected Le Chateau for years. Suddenly, James Calloway wasn't just a restaurant manager in trouble. He was the weak link in a much bigger game. The aftermath. Keanu stood in Times Square, watching news tickers display headlines about Le Chateau. Lisa called. "You watching this?" she asked. Keanu smirked. "Hard to miss." "They found James's car abandoned in New Jersey," she said. "No sign of him." Is running," Keanu muttered. Lisa sighed. "And his investors? They're scrambling. Some are already lawyering up." Keanu nodded. The battle was over, but the war? It was just getting started. As he put his phone away, another anonymous message flashed on his screen. "Well played, but this is bigger than you think. Let's talk." Keanu exhaled. He had exposed one corrupt system, but now he was on the radar of something much bigger. Keanu thought the fight was over. Le Chateau was finished, James Calloway was on the run, and his powerful connections were scrambling to cover their tracks. Federal agents raided financial institutions, investigators uncovered millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions, and public outrage forced political figures to distance themselves from the scandal. But Keanu knew better. People like James didn't operate alone. He was just a piece of the puzzle, one that had now been removed, leaving a void someone else would try to fill. That night, as Keanu walked through Manhattan's dimly lit streets, his phone buzzed. "Unknown number." "Well played. But this is bigger you think. Let's talk." Keanu stopped in his tracks, staring at the message. Someone had been watching a bigger game. The next morning, Keanu arrived at a small cafe on 45th and Lexington as the message had instructed. It was an old, quiet place, the kind of spot where no one paid attention to the person sitting next to them. He scanned the room. At a corner table, a man in his 50s, dressed in an expensive but understated suit, watched him with a knowing smirk. He had the look of someone who had seen too much, but still remained in control. Keanu slid into the seat across from him. "Hey, the one who texted me?" The man took a sip of his coffee. "I was wondering if you'd actually show." Keanu leaned back. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "Names are important. What matters is what happens next." He set a small, unmarked envelope on the table. James Calloway was never the real problem. Le Chateau was just one of many. He paused. The people who backed him? They don't care about restaurants. They care about control. And you just became a problem for them. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "And you? Whose side are you on?" The man chuckled. "Let's just say I don't like people who think they can rewrite the rules just because they're rich." He tapped the envelope, and here's everything you need to know. The real players, the next target. The question is, are you done, or are you ready to go deeper? No turning back. Keanu stared at the envelope, knowing full well what it meant. Walking away meant returning to normal life, pretending this was just another role he played. But stepping forward, it meant exposing something far bigger than a restaurant scam. He exhaled, picking up the envelope. "I'm in." The man grinned, finishing his coffee. Good, because now you're really in the game. As Keanu stepped back onto the busy streets of New York, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about Le Chateau anymore. This was about power. And now he was at war with the people who had too much of it. The message behind the story? At its core, this story isn't just about a corrupt restaurant. It's about power, deception, and the systems that protect the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. Le Chateau was a symbol of exclusivity and perfection, a place where the elite dined without a second thought about the people serving them. But beneath the polished tables and perfectly plated meals, there was rot, exploitation, fraud, and a fear-based system designed to keep people silent. James Calloway wasn't a mastermind, he was just a pawn in a much larger game, one where power wasn't just about money, but about who controls the narrative. When Keanu exposed him, the system didn't just roll over, it fought back using intimidation, erasing evidence, and leveraging connections to make problems disappear. But this story is about something bigger than corruption. It's about standing up against it. Keanu could have walked away, let someone else deal with it, but he didn't. And that's what makes him different. The real question isn't whether corruption exists, it's whether people are willing to fight it, even when the odds are stacked against them. This isn't just a Hollywood thriller, it's a reflection of reality. Power protects itself, the rich get richer, and those who try to expose the truth often find themselves facing something much bigger than they expected. So, after hearing this story, what do you think? Would you have done what Keanu did, or would you have walked away, knowing the risks?